In 2019, actually, I was the first civilian really to go through the George Romero papers um, at what was then his brand new archives at the University of Pittsburgh. And I spent a few days there, and I found in the final box a big, thick manila envelope, and it had the first half of another novel. So really, having seen everything in his papers now, he tried to write a novel 3 times with The Living Dead, and he attempted that sort of twice. So there were sort of two different versions of that, which worked into the our book, The Living Dead. There's a tiny fragment of a novel, very small. I think it's about 15 pages, which there's not really one much can do with that. And then there's this one, Pay the Piper, which was the most, I think, fully formed of his novels, but again, wasn't one he finished. And this one, as opposed to The Living Dead, was really a surprise to almost everyone. It wasn't a project anyone really knew about. It was just something that got turned up. I don't know that it was necessarily a secret project, but it just wasn't one that he shared with anyone. He Romero really worked in fits and starts, so it's possible. I mean, he might have written this all in 1 week. Like I don't know. But it was exciting for me and probably for him because it didn't have anything to do with zombies, and zombies were always a double-edged sword with him. So this was really filled with all the things that I knew that he was excited about just from learning about him from his family. This had, and a lot of it is sort of almost little boy enthusiasm. It's like it's got elements of jungle adventure and pirates and um, sort of the supernatural in a kind of classic way and kind of movie monsters in a way. So it was a really exciting for me to find it. And then eventually I got the permission from his family again to complete it. It was really different because Living Dead, not only do you have sort of the sense of what he's done with his zombie films, but he did leave some notes. I did have some incomplete scaffolding to work with. With this, there was nothing like that. He just stopped suddenly and there was nothing else. And so it involved a lot of detective work of just analyzing what was there and trying to follow clues and figuring out what those clues were referring to. And that got really exciting actually. Like there's a character in the book who's obsessed with John Wayne, and which is, in itself unusual. So I read a couple John Wayne biographies, and sure enough, uh, there's the book is really concerned with one of his movies called Wake of the Red Witch, not a very well-known movie. And when I got to the end of one of these biographies, I found out that John Wayne, who died of cancer, used to call his cancer the Red Witch, based on this movie. And that's one example of the way that sort of exploratory research began connecting dots. And I realized this book was sort of about cancer. But now that he never really got to that point in the book, but I could now see, okay, this is where he was going with some of this stuff. So there were moments like that where some really real eureka moments where he would say something specific enough in the text so that I could look into it and then find something that really looked like it was what he was heading towards. So it was a very strange process, but really unique and interesting. Whalefall, yeah, that was certainly the biggest success I've ever had in my career. Whalefall was a career changer for me. Whalefall's the this scientifically accurate story of a diver who is swallowed by a sperm whale and has 1 hour of air to try to get out. So the whole book takes place in about 90 minutes. Um, and again, I wrote it close consultation with whale experts and diving experts. Um, so everything that happens in the book is possible. So it was once more a different kind of process where I couldn't even begin to understand what could happen inside a whale until I spent months just interviewing whale scientists and biologists because there's no book about this. You really have to go to the people who know and spend the time figuring out, sort of taking a crash course in whale biology to even find out what would be possible as a plot. Um, so that was a really new experience for me. And I think it's been, it's sort of a obviously a claustrophobic real time thriller, but it's also, I think, the the book that I think that people have read and been the most emotional about. It's a very emotional story as well. The son is the boy who is the diver, was diving to try to find his dead dad's bones, and they had a bad relationship because he had drowned, sort of threw himself off a boat because he was dying of cancer and in those waters. And so in the whale's stomach, injured and under the effects of methane poisoning, he begins to imagine that the whale is his dad. Like the whale absorbed his dad in a way. And so if he can come to terms with his relationship with his dad, he might remember all the things his dad told him about the ocean and sea life, and it might be able to save his life. He can remember those things. To begin with, I didn't have any idea, of course, because I didn't know what was in there. In popular culture, all we have is like Pinocchio, where the whale's stomach is like an auditorium. So I knew that wasn't accurate, but I didn't know what was accurate. So my scientist very patiently led me sort of step by step of what a stomach is like, how much space there is, what you can do, what does it smell like, how hot or cold is it. There's actually a number of stomachs. The whales are sort of like cows in that sense. You can kind of travel from one stomach to the other. Um, but it's an alien world in there. Like sperm whales don't chew with their mouths, for instance. They chew with their stomach. So their stomach is crunching down on the diver. That's the first stomach anyway. That's sort of the chewing stomach. The second stomach is the one that's full of all the dissolving acid. So that's even worse. So it was really a matter of, as they were taking me on this kind of tour of whale innards, of me interrupting with questions like, could the diver grab on to X, or could he could he make his way around Y or Z, and sort of putting these hypotheticals out there that then they could comment on. And sometimes they would say no. Sorry. Sometimes they would say no. Sometimes they would say yes. Uh, and sometimes they would say no, but he could do this. And very, very slowly, the plot was sort of dictated to me in a way through what was even possible. I didn't really know if the diver was going to live or not. I had, in the outlining of it, certain things came to light when I was asking questions about what was possible that led me to one direction. Um, but I didn't really know until I got to that ending in the book whether or not I was going to hew to what I had outlined or not. I wanted to just go with whatever felt right at the moment. But once I got there, I knew what the right choice was. It seemed pretty obvious to me once I actually got there. There was one way that just made a more interesting story, I think. But I do feel like it could have worked either way. I think the message comes through regardless. Every once in a while, you get a book in a career, I think, that it just hits the right people at the right time. And Whalefall is a book that's not easily categorized. I've seen people shelve it in horror. I've seen people shelve it in thriller. I've seen people shelve it in sci-fi. It it has a little something for everyone, and often that can be actually a deficit in selling a book because people don't know what to do with it. But in this one case, it ended up really, I think, opening it wide to people. And I think the one line premise is just so irresistible in a way. Um, yeah, it's just, a lot of people read it. So like number wise, it was successful. It was on the cover of the New York Times. Like they're just sort of like these sort of career benchmarks that um, you don't necessarily even expect to ever happen sort of happened. We just turned in the script for the movie that 20th Century Fox is making. So it just has a lot of momentum that is ongoing. And really just more than any of that though, because that's sort of all gravy, it really hit people emotionally. Um, and that's something that, I've seen in pieces, but never the tidal wave sort of feeling and feedback that I got with Whalefall. Lisi and I had been sort of paired together by our mutual agent for a project that was a podcast project that didn't end up panning out. But we liked working together a lot, and so we tried to come up with something to work on together. And she is, her specialty is sort of middle grade girl readers. My specialty is horror. So we said, well, how can we put those together in an interesting way? So we came up with this 5 book series. Just this week, we finished book 4, so we're sort of coming into the final stretch. Only 2 books have, as of the day we're speaking, only 2 books are out, but they come out one a year. So there's these 5 middle school girls who are friends, and they have this kind of secret club where they tell scary stories. So every book more or less follows the everyday life, although sort of spooky goings ons too, of these girls. And then at one point in each book, they get together and they one of them takes a turn telling a scary story. And so every book sort of contains in it a horror story. And that story then, once it's told, uh, sort of reflects and comments on what's going on in their real lives. Uh, so um, so yeah, it's been really fun, but very different from what I normally do. But then again, that's everything I do.